too big to be loved. The room was cold and quiet. Zarila stood in the center of the glowing white circle. Her strong arms were by her sides, her large body covered in ceremonial armor, but her heart was shaking. Around her, the elders sat in tall silver chairs. Their long robes touched the floor. None of them looked at her with kindness. One of them finally spoke. "Zarila of Clanvorth, you are unfit to carry our future. Your body is too large, your biology too different. You have failed the fertility trials." Zarila didn't move. She had heard rumors, but this was a sentence. "Because of your condition," the elder continued, "you will never reproduce. You are now a waste of resources. You are to be exiled from Vorth society, effective immediately." Gasps echoed in the chamber. Even the guards looked shocked. Zarila lowered her head. Her people had always valued strength. She was one of the strongest warriors. But none of it mattered now. All they wanted was females who could birth the next generation. Her strength, her courage, her loyalty, useless. As she left the judgment chamber, no one said a word. Not even her own sister looked her in the eyes. Zarila was now an outcast. Weeks passed. She took whatever transport she could find. She cleaned ship halls, moved crates, and stayed silent. People stared at her wherever she went. Her height, her thick arms, her deep voice. Everything about her was too much for them. Some whispered she was broken. Others said she was cursed. One day, while delivering cargo to a human colony on the edge of the galaxy, something went wrong. Her shuttle's engine exploded mid-flight. Alarms screamed, and Zarila fought to keep the craft steady. But it was no use. She crashed. The world she landed on was dry and full of dust. The sun was bright, and the wind howled like a beast. Zarila crawled from the wreckage, bleeding from her side. Her vision blurred, her head spun, and then she blacked out. Jacob was a simple man, a human engineer living in a farming outpost. He liked quiet mornings, fixing machines and growing things. That morning he saw smoke in the sky. A ship had gone down, badly. He grabbed his toolkit and drove his rover across the dunes to investigate. What he found made him freeze. A massive, alien woman covered in bruises lay in the sand. Her body was half covered in broken metal and wires. Her breathing was weak. Jacob hesitated. He had seen aliens before, but never one like her. She looked powerful and dangerous. But then he saw her face. Her expression wasn't angry. It was tired, broken. He made his choice. Zarila woke up inside a warm shelter. A soft blanket covered her. A strange machine was humming beside her. She blinked slowly, confused. Then she saw the human. He was sitting near her, watching quietly. A small mug in his hand steamed with something warm. "You're awake," he said. "Took you long enough." Zarila tried to sit up. Pain shot through her ribs. She winced. "Easy. You've got a cracked bone or two." "I patched what I could. Not a doctor, but I've seen worse," Jacob said. "Why?" Zarila's voice was rough. "Why help me?" Jacob shrugged. "You crashed. You were hurt. Would have been wrong to leave you." She stared at him. "You are not afraid of me?" He smiled a little. "Should I be?" No one had ever said that to her before. In the next few days, Zarila stayed inside the shelter. She learned the human's name was Jacob. He gave her food, simple meals but warm. He let her rest. He didn't ask questions she didn't want to answer. One evening, she sat by the window and looked outside. Children played near the crops. Families cooked dinner together. It was a peaceful place. She said, almost whispering, "My people cast me out." Jacob was checking a pipe when he paused. "Why?" "They said I cannot reproduce. My body is wrong. Too big. Too different." Jacob didn't look shocked. "Sounds like their loss." Zarila turned to him, surprised. He continued, "Strength isn't a curse, and different doesn't mean broken." She looked at him with wide eyes. In that one sentence, something in her heart moved, something that hadn't moved in a long, long time. The human who didn't flinch, Zarilla, stared at the man called Jacob as he handed her a steaming cup of strange brown liquid. "Coffee," he said. "Might taste bitter, but it wakes you up." She sniffed it carefully. The smell was sharp, earthy, completely different from anything on her homeworld. Still, she took a sip. It was awful. Jacob laughed at her face. "Told you. For the first time in years," Zarilla smiled. Just a little, but it faded quickly. Why was this human treating her like she mattered? She looked down at her hands. They were rough, scarred from battles. Her fingers were too thick for delicate things. People had used her as a soldier. Then when she couldn't give them children, they threw her away. But Jacob looked at her like she was whole. The days passed. Zarilla helped around the outpost to repay him. She lifted heavy steel beams like paper. She repaired broken machines. With her precise movements, no one dared stop her, partly from fear but also awe. The human settlers began whispering, "She's that alien crash survivor. She's huge, but polite. Did you see her fix the water line by herself?" Still, some stayed distant. A few even called her a beast. One child ran crying when he saw her shadow. That night, Zarilla sat alone outside Jacob's dome, watching the stars. Her thick arms were wrapped around her knees. She didn't cry. Her kind weren't allowed to cry. But her chest hurt. She whispered, "I don't belong anywhere." Behind her, Jacob walked out quietly and sat beside her. "You know," he said, "when I first came here, they called me a waste too." Zarilla turned her head surprised. "Back on Earth, I had an accident. Lost my career, so I came out here far from the noise. I thought I'd be alone forever." He looked at her, eyes kind and calm. "But now, I'm not so sure." The next morning, Zarilla was fixing a crop harvester when something sharp pierced her glove. It was a small thorn from an alien weed, but within seconds her hand turned dark purple. Her knees buckled. Jacob caught her just in time and dragged her inside his shelter. She was fading fast. "No, no, no, don't you dare give up now," he shouted, scrambling through his drawers. "Stay with me." He found a med kit, used the antitoxin spray, then started cleaning the wound with trembling hands. "I'm not letting you die," he growled. As the medicine worked, Zarilla coughed and gasped, but the color returned to her skin. Her huge body twitched. Then she opened one eye. "You're loud," she murmured. Jacob laughed with relief, and then cursed under his breath. Later, she sat up in bed, weaker but alive. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why do you keep helping me? I am not one of your kind. My own people don't even want me." Jacob looked serious. "Because you don't deserve to be treated like trash. You're strong, capable, kind, and I don't care what your people said. I see a future in you." Zarilla blinked slowly. "What kind of future?" Jacob took a deep breath. He walked over to a dusty old data tablet, tapped a few keys, and showed her a file, a medical one. It belonged to his late wife, now gone for years. The file was about fertility treatments, cross-species compatibility experiments, and unapproved trials Earth never finished. Jacob spoke carefully. "She wanted a child. We couldn't, but I kept her research going. Quietly. The funny part? Some of her data, it matches your biology." Zarilla's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Jacob looked into her eyes. "I think there's a chance you can still be a mother. Not the way your people wanted, but maybe in a new way." Silence filled the room. Zarilla's hands trembled. You would do this? For me?" "I'm offering hope. No promises, just a chance." She stared at him for a long time. Her people had thrown her out like garbage, but this human? He didn't flinch, didn't call her broken. Instead, he said, "Let's try together." The machine in the garden. The lab smelled like dust, metal, and old memories. Zarilla stood still as Jacob gently adjusted the scanning device near her shoulder. She was inside his private med bay now, deep under his greenhouse dome. The lights were dim, and the machines made soft beeping sounds. Her huge hands were clenched tightly. This was the first time in her life someone had ever touched her gently during a medical scan. Her own people had treated her like a broken tool. Cold, rough and silent, Jacob, he treated her like a person. "Just breathe," he said. "It won't hurt." Zarila nodded. She had survived wars. This was nothing. But her heart still pounded. Jacob watched the screen as it displayed a 3D model of her alien organs. His eyes narrowed as data scrolled down the side. "Huh. What is it?" she asked quickly. "You're not sterile," Jacob said softly. "Your species just used the wrong methods." Zarila blinked. "What?" Jacob pointed to the screen. "Your body rejected their fertility tech because it wasn't made for your real biology. You're not broken, Zarila. You were just never understood." The room went silent. Zarila stepped back. Her chest rose and fell quickly. All those years, her exile, her shame. It had been a mistake. Later that evening, Jacob took her to the greenhouse. It was a large dome, full of earth, plants, some green, some red, some glowing softly in the dark. Strange birds chirped in one corner. The air smelled fresh and sweet. Zarila walked slowly between the tall vines, brushing her fingers across the leaves. "I never liked plants before," she said. Jacob smiled. "That's because you never met ones like mine." She raised an eyebrow. "These plants are like you," he continued, "stronger than they look. Survive in tough places, grow where no one thinks they can." Zarila looked down. Her rough hand touched the soft flower petals. She whispered, "I want to grow too." Jacob led her to a table covered with old research equipment, glass tubes, glowing vials, and data pads full of code. "I continued my wife's work after she passed," he said. "She believed in cross-species life, a bridge between worlds." Hesitated. "I want to try something with you, but it's risky." Zarila met his eyes. "Tell me, a synthetic embryo, combined DNA, yours and mine. It won't be easy. And the world isn't ready." She stared at him. "Why me?" "Because," he said, "you're not afraid of pain. And because you deserve the chance they stole from you." Zarila slowly sat down at the edge of the table. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "I was never allowed to hope. Not even as a child. But here, in this strange garden, with this strange man." She reached out and touched Jacob's hand. "I want to hope." In the next days, they worked side by side. Zarila cleaned equipment with her strong hands. Jacob programmed the gene mixer. They laughed when something exploded in the lab. They cried, secretly, when the first cell failed to survive. But they didn't stop. Day by day, Zarila began to change. Her eyes were brighter. Her back stood straighter. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was dreaming. And Jacob? He no longer looked like a lonely man on a forgotten colony. He looked like a partner, a builder of something new. One night, as they watched the stars through the dome ceiling, Zarila whispered, "If this works, and what will our child be?" Jacob smiled. "Something the galaxy has never seen." Tests and tears. The medical chamber was quiet, but the silence felt loud. Zarila lay still under the glowing scanner while Jacob adjusted the settings. She had faced death before. She had fought battles and seen planets burn. But now, lying here, waiting for a machine to tell her if she could become a mother, she was more afraid than ever. "Relax," Jacob said gently. "Just one more test." She nodded, but her claws dug into the side of the table. This wasn't just a test. It was her last chance at something her entire species had stolen from her. The results appeared slowly on the screen. Jacob leaned forward, his brow furrowed. He didn't speak. Zarila sat up, her voice rough. "Say it." Jacob turned to her slowly, his eyes unreadable. "Your reproductive matrix It's different from both humans and your own kind. It's not broken, it's unique. She stared. What does that mean? He smiled softly. It means the embryo survived. Zarila's world stopped. Repeat that, she whispered. The hybrid cell we made, it survived. It's alive, dividing, growing. She shook her head, almost refusing to believe it. Her hands trembled as she covered her face. For the first time in her life, she cried. Not because she was broken, not because of shame. She cried because she felt hope. Jacob sat beside her and placed a hand gently on her back. Her huge shoulders shook. No one had ever seen Zarila cry before, not even her own clan. She pulled herself together slowly and looked at him. Is it safe? She asked. Jacob's face grew serious. It's early. It will take many tests. It could still fail. But we are past the hardest part. Zarila nodded slowly. She wasn't afraid of hardship. She just wanted the chance. The next few weeks were difficult. Zarila went through dozens of treatments, nutrient infusions, DNA stabilizers, hormone rebalancing. The human medbots often failed to fit her frame, and Jacob had to customize everything, himself. Each night, Zarila sat near the glowing pod where the embryo floated. It was tiny, fragile, a mix of alien strength and human resilience. She often whispered to it in her own language, stories, songs, secrets she had never told anyone. Jacob once heard her whisper, "You are already more loved than I ever was." But peace didn't last long. One afternoon, a message came from orbit. A Vorth patrol ship had received news of an illegal, hybrid experiment involving a rejected female. Zarila's heart dropped. "They know," she said. Jacob clenched his fists. "Let them come." But she shook her head. "If they take the child, they will destroy it, study it. They'll say it's unnatural." Jacob looked her in the eyes. "Then we'll protect it." That night, Jacob reinforced the dome and transferred the embryo pod into an underground safe room. Zarila sharpened her claws for the first time in months. She had once been a soldier. Now she was something stronger, a mother. One night, before the sun rose, Zarila stood by the embryo pod and spoke softly. "My people said I was too big to be a mother. But maybe my heart was always meant to carry something greater." She placed her hand gently on the glass. "I won't let anyone take you." Behind her, Jacob said, "Neither will I." They stood in silence, together in fear, together in love. Hope in a glass tube. The embryo floated in a soft blue light, protected inside a glass pod beneath the earth. To Zarila, it was more than science. It was a miracle. Every morning she knelt before the pod. She pressed her forehead gently to the glass and whispered words in her native tongue, a forgotten language of war songs and lullabies. This was not just a life, it was her redemption. Jacob worked day and night now. The system needed constant updates to stabilize the hybrid DNA. Human. Genes clashed with Vorth strands every few hours. Jacob used every tool he had. Software patches, nutrient adjustments, even cooling systems from broken starships. Each night Jacob's eyes burned red from sleeplessness. Zarila told him to rest. He always replied, "Not until I know you're both safe." Then, the signal came. An unauthorized ship entered the atmosphere. Jacob's system screamed alarms across the dome. Zarila raced to the screen. The ship's symbol flashed in red, Vorth Empire. "They're here," she growled, her claws extended on instinct. Jacob narrowed his eyes. "They won't touch our child." He activated the defense field around the dome. But it was weak. The system hadn't been used in years. Zarila turned to him. "There is another way." Jacob frowned. "What do you mean?" She walked toward the weapons crate she had never opened. "I will talk to them." Minutes later, Zarila stood at the edge of the landing field. Her tall, powerful body was covered in the black armor of her old days. It no longer fit perfectly. Her body had changed, softer in some places, stronger in others. But her spirit? It burned hotter than ever. The alien ship opened. A squad of armored Vorth soldiers stepped out, followed by a tall female elder. Zarilla's heart froze. It was High Matron Arca, the same one who had declared her unfit, the one who had exiled. Her the elder sneered. "You dare stand before us, an exiled defect?" Zarilla's voice was calm but sharp. "I stand before you as a protector now." "We know what you have done," Rika hissed. "Creating an abomination with a primitive species? That child belongs to the Empire now, for testing. You will surrender it." Zarilla took one step forward. No. Behind her, Jacob had placed the embryo pod in a reinforced escape rover. He kept the engine warm. His hand shook on the control stick. He trusted Zarilla. But he knew the Vorth well. They didn't make threats. They took what they wanted. Back outside, Zarilla raised her voice. "My body was too big for you, my mind too disobedient. You threw me away." She stepped closer to the soldiers. "But I found someone who saw value in me. Not as a tool, as a person." One soldier raised a weapon. She didn't flinch. "I am more than what your tests said. And that child is not an error. It is proof that life finds a way." The elder snarled. "You defy the Empire?" Zarilla raised her claws and said with fire in her chest, "I defy anyone who tries to steal my child." The soldiers hesitated. This was not the broken female they had exiled. This was a mother ready to destroy anyone who touched her baby. Rika raised her hand, and then slowly lowered it. She had seen warriors before, but not one glowing with that kind of fire. "Very well," she said coldly. "Keep your creature. But know this, there is no place for you in the Empire." Zarilla gave a soft smile. "I stopped looking for one the day I found a family." The soldiers returned to their ship. The engines roared, and just like that, they were gone. Later that night, Zarilla returned to the dome. Her armor was scratched, her voice was quiet. Jacob stood by the pod, eyes wide. "Did they left," she whispered. "Because I didn't." He looked at her, confused. "I didn't leave who I am anymore," she explained. "I'm not hiding. I'm not scared. I'm a mother, and I will never run again." Jacob placed his hand over hers on the pod glass. Inside, the embryo twitched, alive, safe. Hope, in a glass tube, had survived. Enemies return. The days after the confrontation felt calm, but it was the kind of calm before a storm. Jacob and Zarilla took turns watching the embryo pod. The hybrid child was now the size of a large apple, glowing softly inside the pod. Its vitals were stable. Its heart, a mixture of two worlds, beat strong and steady. But neither of them slept well, because they both knew something was coming. One cold morning, Jacob received a scrambled message from the colony's outer satellite. Unauthorized transmission. Encrypted signal. Multiple Vorth signatures. Zarilla's blood ran cold. "They didn't give up," she whispered. Jacob clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a scare tactic. That elder was only the first wave. They called an emergency meeting with the local human council. The council members, mostly scientists and settlers, sat stiffly in their chairs as Jacob explained the situation. Zarilla stood behind him, tall and silent, like a shadow of war. "This is not just about us," Jacob warned. "The Vorth want to control the future. That child, our child, is proof that two species can create life. They won't stop until they own it, or erase it." A few council members looked uncertain. "She's not human," one man said, pointing to Zarilla. "How do we know she's not a threat?" Jacob slammed his hand on the table. "She is the reason I'm alive. She's risked everything. And that child is not a weapon. It's hope." Then, for the first time in a public space, Zarilla spoke. "I was called useless. I was left to die. But I survived. Not because of my strength, but because one human didn't see me as a monster." She looked around the room. I don't need your acceptance. I only ask that you don't stand in my way. Silence fell. Then, one councilwoman nodded. We'll help you hide the child, for now. That night, as winds howled across the desert, the enemy returned. But not from the sky. This time, they used traitors. 2 humans, secretly working for the Vorth, disabled the greenhouse shield system. They snuck into the lab and tried to steal the embryo pod. They almost succeeded, until Cyrilla caught them in the dark hallway. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She moved. Her claws flashed once. One man dropped instantly, unconscious. The other pulled a weapon, but never got the chance to fire. Jacob hit him with a shock rod from behind. Alarms blared. Backup came. By the time the council's security arrived, the traitors were already tied up, bleeding, bruised, but alive. The pod had not been taken. But the message was clear. We will take what we want, no matter who protects it. Later, Cyrilla sat beside the pod, her chest heaving. Blood stained her armor. Her hands shook. Jacob placed a blanket around her. I shouldn't have let you face them alone, he said. You didn't, she whispered. You were there, like always. She reached out, placing her hand over the pod once again. I was afraid of being a mother. Now I'm afraid I won't live long enough to become one. Jacob sat beside her and gently pressed his forehead to hers. You will. But far above the planet, on a dark Vorth battleship, a figure stood in silence. Not an elder, not a soldier, a scientist, watching Cyrilla's image on a hologram. She's farther along than expected, the scientist said. The hybrid is viable. Another voice, cold and sharp, replied, then begin phase 2. The screen went dark. Back on the surface, Cyrilla felt something deep in her gut, a sense of danger she couldn't explain. She looked up at the stars and whispered, They're coming, again. And this time, they won't leave without blood. Mother, at last. The desert winds howled louder that night. The stars above were clear, too clear. Cyrilla stood outside the dome, eyes narrowed, watching the sky. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her claws were already out. Her armor was already on. She could feel it. Jacob joined her, holding a scanner. The readings were worse than expected. One ship's already entered orbit, he said. Big one, heavily armed. They're not here to talk. Cyrilla didn't need to be told. This time, the Vorth weren't sending threats or scouts. They were sending an army. In the hidden chamber beneath the greenhouse, the embryo, now nearly full-grown, floated inside a protective womb pod. Its tiny hands twitched. Its heart beat strong. Cyrilla looked at the pod for the 100th time that day. She had no words. Her eyes said everything. She touched the glass gently. You don't even have a name yet. But I would burn worlds for you. Jacob activated the base's old emergency systems. Shields buzzed to life. Defense turrets rose from the sand like metal snakes. Generators groaned under the pressure, but they both knew this wasn't enough to fight off a Vorth military vessel. They needed a plan. They needed to escape. Jacob pulled up a terrain map. There's a ravine 2 miles east, he said. Too narrow for ships. We can hide the pod there, long enough to finish the birth cycle, then extract you both. Cyrilla looked at him. And what about you? Jacob smiled, faintly. Someone has to slow them down. She grabbed his arm. No, I won't lose you too. He placed his forehead against hers. You won't. I promise. The escape began at nightfall. Jacob drove the rover, the pod secured inside a steel container, in the back. Cyrilla rode beside it, armor gleaming under the moonlight, her weapon clutched tightly. Every bump on the road made her heart jump. The pod hissed softly. Its temperature was dropping. They had to hurry. Behind them, far in the distance, a red light lit the sky. The Vorth ship had landed. They reached the ravine just before midnight. It was deep and narrow, carved by ancient water. The walls were tall and sharp. Perfect cover. Jacob, set up a temporary birthing shelter using portable walls and energy sheets. He connected the pod to the power core. Cirilla stood watch, weapon ready, ears tuned to every sound. Hours passed. Then the pod beeped, softly but urgently. Cirilla rushed inside. "It's happening," Jacob said, sweat on his brow. The pod opened. With a hiss. Steam rose, and then, slowly, weakly, a shape moved. A small body with soft skin that shimmered between blue and pale tan. Large eyes blinked. Tiny hands reached out. The child let out a cry, high and clear. Cirilla dropped to her knees. Her heart, for the first time in her life, felt full. She picked up the baby, her baby, and held them close. Warm. Alive. Breathing. Jacob whispered, "You did it." "No," she said. Tears fell silently down her cheeks. "We did it." But there was no time to celebrate. An explosion rocked the entrance of the ravine. The Vorth had found them. Cirilla handed the baby to Jacob. "Take them. Get inside the birthing shelter. Lock it." Jacob hesitated. "Do it," she growled, but her voice was cracking. He nodded and disappeared into the shelter, sealing it shut. Cirilla turned to face the cliff. Her claws extended, her muscles tensed. The enemy was coming. The first Vorth soldier dropped down the rocks. Cirilla struck him before he could speak. Then another, and another. Blades met claws. Plasma met armor. The air sizzled with heat and screams. Cirilla fought like a beast, like a mother protecting her den. Her body bled, her armor cracked, but she didn't fall. From inside the shelter, Jacob watched the security cam in horror. Cirilla stood alone now, surrounded. 10 enemies. Maybe more. Her knees buckled. She stood again, another hit, and still, she did not fall. Then, silence. The feed went dark. Jacob held the child close. Tears streamed down his face. "Please," he whispered, "just come back." Hours passed. The sun rose. Smoke drifted across the ravine. Then, a shadow moved near the rocks. Jacob aimed his weapon. "Ready." The figure stepped forward. It was her. Bloody, burned, limping, but alive, and still holding a broken enemy banner in one hand. She collapsed at the entrance. Jacob caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him, weak but smiling. "Did they cry?" Jacob nodded. Loudly. She laughed. It hurt. But it was the most beautiful sound Jacob had ever heard. Weeks later, back at the outpost, humans and peaceful alien settlers gathered around the new dome. Inside, the child slept in a crystal cradle surrounded by flowers and light. The story of Cirilla spread across the stars. The exiled one, the outcast, the warrior who became the first cross-species mother. People came to see the child. Some came to judge. Most came to learn. Cirilla never gave speeches. She didn't need to. She simply stood beside Jacob, holding their child, quietly proud. One night, as stars shimmered above, Jacob asked, "Have you thought of a name?" Cirilla looked down at the sleeping baby, then whispered, "Mira." He smiled. "Why?" She touched the child's small hand. "In my language, it means born from fire." And so the child grew, strong like her mother, kind like her father. A symbol of what was once impossible. Proof that even those cast out can become the beginning of something new. And that sometimes, monsters aren't born. They're made. By those who never understood what love could build. But mothers? They're made by something stronger. Hope. The end.